Good day, everyone. So now we move on to chapter 7, Persuasion. So, persuasion is defined as the process by which a message induces change in beliefs, attitudes, or behaviors. So, sometimes persuasion occurs as people focus on arguments and respond with favorable thoughts. Such systematic or central root persuasion occurs when people are naturally analytical or involved in the issue. So, what paths lead to persuasion? First, we have the central root. Central root to persuasion occurs when interested people focus on the arguments and respond with favorable thoughts. Then we have the peripheral root, which is the persuasion that occurs when people are influenced by incidental cues such as speakers' attractiveness. It is also focusing on cues that trigger automatic acceptance without much thinking. So, what are the elements of persuasion? So, we have the credibility. It is the believability. A credible communicator is perceived as both expert and trustworthy. Then we have the perceived expertise. So, how do you become an authoritative expert? One way is to begin by saying things the audience agrees with, which make you seem smart. Then we have the speaking style. Another way to appear credible is to speak confidently and fluently. Then lastly, we have the perceived trustworthiness. We are more willing to listen to a communicator with trust. So we have this term that we call sleeper effect. It is a delayed impact of a message that occurs when an initially discounted message becomes effective, such as we remember the message but forget the reason for discounting it. Then we also have the attractiveness. Attractiveness is having qualities that appeal to an audience. An appealing communicator, often someone similar to the audience, is most persuasive on matters of subjective preference. So next we have the reason versus emotion. So people can be persuaded based on their reason versus emotion, such as there's route to persuasion. When it is the central root, they are more responsive to reasoned arguments, whereas if they are interested, they are more often to trouble the peripheral root, meaning they are more affected by their liking of the communicator. So another reason or that thing that influence the persuasion of the audience is the effect of good feelings. So messages also became more persuasive through association with good feelings, such as what often accompanies munching food or hearing pleasant music. Another reason for being that can contribute to persuading the audience is the effect of arousing fear. So messages can also be effective by evoking negative emotions when persuading people to cut down on smoking, get a tetanus shot, or drive carefully. A fear-arousing message can be potent. So next we have the message context. The context of your message, especially what immediately precedes it, can be a big difference in how persuasive it is. So we have the term that we call foot in the door phenomenon. It is the tendency for people who have first agreed to a smaller request to comply later with a larger request. Then we have the lowball technique. It is a tactic for getting people to agree to something. People who agree to an initial request will often still comply when the requester ups the ante. People who receive only the costly requests are less likely to comply with it. Then next we have the term door in the face technique. It is a strategy for gaining a concession. After someone first turns down a large request, the same requester counter offers with a more reasonable request. Then we have the one-sided versus two-sided appeals. In a simulated trials, a defense case becomes more credible when the defense brings up damaging evidence before the prosecution does. Then we have the primacy versus recency. So the primacy effect, it is the other things being equal. Information presented first usually has the most influence. Then the recency effect is the information presented last sometimes has the most influence. Recency effect are less common than primacy effect. So how it is said, or the channel of communication also influence persuade how people can be persuaded. So the channel of communication, it is the way the message is delivered, whether face to face, in writing or film, or in some other way. So then we have the active experience or passive reception. So a question that we can be asked is that, are spoken appeals more persuasive? So let's answer it. It is not necessarily. Those of who speak publicly, such as the teachers or persuaders, often become so enamored of our spoken words that we overestimate their power. Then we have the personal versus media influence. Persuasion studies demonstrate that the major influence on us is not the media, but our contact with people. So media influence, the two-step flow. We have this two-step flow of communication. It is the process by which media influence often occurs through opinion leaders who in turn influence others. Then we have the comparing media, lumping together all media from mass mailings to television to social networking oversimplifies. Then we have the influence of adults on children. Communication flows from adults to children, although as most parents and teachers can tell you, getting them to listen is not always easy. So to whom is it said? The audience. So how old are they? Social psychologists offer two possible explanations for age differences. First is that a life cycle explanation. It says that attitudes change, for example, become more conservative as people grow older. Then second, a generational explanation. It says that attitudes do not change, but older people largely hold onto the attitudes they adopted when they were young. Because these attitudes are different from those being adopted by young people today, a generation gap develops. So how can persuasion be resisted? So we have strengthening personal commitment. It says that when you strengthen your personal commitment, you can resist persuasion. So before encountering others' judgments, make a public commitment to your position. Having stood up for your convictions, you will become less susceptible, or should we say less open to what others have to say. Then, developing counter arguments, it can help to resist persuasion in a way that you expose people to weak attacks upon their attitude so that when stronger attacks come, they will have refutations available. So next is a way to resist persuasion is applying real-life applications such as inoculation programs. An example of this is inoculating children against peer pressure to smoke and inoculating children against the influence of advertising. Then lastly is the implications of attitude inoculation. So the best way to strengthen existing attitudes is to challenge them, although the challenge must not be so strong as to overwhelm them. So that would be all today. Thank you for listening.